Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on funding Main Street management, where we'll be looking at 3 different models for your community to review. My name is Kristen Lopez. I am the Education and Training Director here at Connecticut Main Street Center. And based on our registration numbers on this topic, it's on everyone's mind. So we're really excited to host this webinar and to bring up our speakers here in just a minute. But before we get started, I just have a few words. Connecticut Main Street Center is the expert resource for developing and sustaining vibrant downtowns and main streets that fuel our state's prosperity. We all know a great downtown when we see it. It's a feeling, an energy that we can sense, see, experience, but sometimes it can be hard to articulate exactly what makes a main street so great. So we've broken it down into 6 qualities to make it easier to grasp. First, fundamentally, there's always a dedicated main street model. Second, the main street is connected by multiple modes of transportation for people to access. It's welcoming and friendly and inclusive to all people. There are sustainable practices in place that bring life and vibrancy for today and for the future. Small businesses are supported and encouraged, but there's also support and investment for different types of development. And of course, there is a unique sense of place. It is our mission at Connecticut Main Street Center to assess, educate, and convene around these qualities of a vibrant downtown so that main streets all around our state can develop, grow, and prosper. We are very grateful to our sponsors and funding partners that make this work possible. Connecticut Main Street's founding sponsors are Eversource and the State of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development. We also receive funding from Webster Bank, Travelers, and Liberty Bank. And some quick housekeeping notes. This webinar is going to be about an hour long in total. We're going to make sure that there's a good chunk of time at the end to ask a lot of questions. So as you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be sure to get to them when we open up for Q&A. And when you exit this webinar, you'll see you'll be redirected to an evaluation link. Please take a moment to complete that evaluation. It really helps us develop more meaningful educational programs for you. And with that, I am super excited to bring up our panel today. Each of them is going to have about a 10-minute presentation to go over their model of funding Main Street management. And first up is Jennifer Goldman of Jennifer E. Goldman, LLC, who will be talking about 501c3s. And then we have Sandra Russo-Driska, the manager of Middletown Downtown Business District, who will be speaking on BIDs or special services districts. And then we have Michael Andreana, the attorney at Pullman and Comley, who will be talking about TIF districts. First up, we have Jennifer.
Hi, thank you so much, Kristen. This is really great. I think this is a wonderful topic, and I'm learning as much as everybody else with the other models, but the first model is going to be the 501c3. I used to be a Main Street manager for all of you who don't know me. And I have since gone on and started my own company. I'm a nonprofit management consultant, and most of what I work with are 501c3s. So we're going to talk about all of this, the pros and cons. I've titled this The Good, the Bad, the Pretty, and the Pretty Ugly, just to give you an idea of what it's like to fund an organization through being a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Kristen, if you could go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. So first, when you form a nonprofit organization or 501c3, you start by forming a legal entity just like you would any business. So you would go to your state corporation commission, or in Connecticut, it is the Secretary of State, where you would go when you file, you just pay a fee and you start a legal entity. At that point, you are an LLC. However, you are what I call a proud not an owner. Because as you know, for a business, when you start out, you own that business. For a nonprofit organization, the board doesn't technically own that entity. you are responsible for it, but you're not specifically an owner. So that is something you can either see as a pro or a con. But what happens after that then is you would go to the IRS and file for your non-profit status or your tax exempt status. In this case, the 501c3, there are 501c with other numbers, but for this Main Street model, it would be a 501c3 or charitable organization. And this is something that I usually encourage people to find an attorney or someone who is adept at these, they're called 1023 forms. It's not something you really want to do by trial and error if you can help it. They're long and entailed and have up to a 25% chance of being rejected on the first round. So there are two forms. One is the easy form, which is only 2.5 pages long. They expect you to take somewhere around 5.5 hours to complete it. Costs $275 to file, and the response time is within about a month. The long form is about 26 pages long, has 15.5 hours of prep time for it, and costs $600 to file, and it takes a lot longer. Of course, the easy form is more difficult if you're not adept at using this form. So that's why I say usually get somebody who knows what they're doing with these forms that can get them through easily. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot of time. If you get rejected, it doesn't mean you can't become a nonprofit organization, just means you have to refile. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. So then once you're an official entity, you are now a nonprofit organization. It is up to you to put together all those rules that you're going to follow as an organization and form out the board. Usually a state will require you to have 3 board members when you file. But then you want a full board once you really start to operate. So if you haven't done that before you filed, now you want to figure out how many board members is going to be appropriate for your organization and get the articles of incorporation. Well, I guess the articles, sorry, should be the bylaws that are written there. The bylaws and the rules and the policies and procedures that you want to operate under. Typically what happens is when you start filing, you find 2 other people with you who will just say, yes, I'll be on that filing for you with the state, but then you really need to find the people who are willing to dig in with you and get their hands dirty and do the work, the people who believe your mission. And sometimes that's easy, sometimes that can be challenging because the original board is probably going to put in the most work. And so you will all need to sit down and figure out how you want to operate this entity that you've started. Next slide. And next, you have to find money. And so it's all about image, how you're portraying this organization to the community, what kind of buy-in you're going to get. And so I created these 3 visuals for you. Hopefully you'll remember, are you going to be the beggar, the thief, or the business person? And think about it when people are asking you for money, what do you want? I mean, the puppies are cute and everything, but you don't want to be seen as begging for money. And the raccoon, also cute, but they're the ones you think of who are always stealing your stuff. And so you want to present your organization as being very business oriented and showing value in the community, because everybody wants to be part of something successful. And so you want to present yourself that way. I urge you to go back to the very beginning where we said, the first thing you do is start an LLC. Think of yourself that way. Start a business, start to show what impact you're going to make on your community. You'll do a lot better with gaining community buy-in that way and getting people to help you, fund the organization, but also help you with volunteerism. Next slide. And one of the great things, being a 501c3, money can come from anywhere. Your organization can fundraise any way you like as long as it's legal. You can get restricted funds, unrestricted funds. I know we were talking earlier before we let everybody in about grants and what it's like applying for grants right now. So you can look for grant money. As a 501c3, you're actually eligible for more grants than other types of entities. And that can be a really big help to you. Also, your donations that you receive can be tax deductible. I usually encourage people to tell their donors to check with their accountants or whoever's doing their taxes or bookkeeping to make sure that they're following the laws. But most donations to a 501c3 would be tax deductible. You're eligible to go looking for wealth managers and other people who might be able to help introduce you to people who might give major gifts or legacy giving, planned giving, things of that nature. You can charge fees for service if you want. You can print your logo on things and sell them for swag. You really can do anything that you want. Next slide. And the sky's the limit. There's no one who is going to set your budget but your organization. You're not limited to your district's participant, not limited to district participants' contributions or tax dollars allocated to your organization. You fundraise and bring in whatever you want to. I know previously there was a myth, hopefully it's been dispelled by now, but people used to say, oh, as a nonprofit organization, we can't make money, or we can only make so much money because we're going to get in trouble by the IRS, and that is false. You can make as much money as you want to. The only caveat is that you have to make sure that you're recording it and investing it back into your community and your mission work. You don't want to set off red flags with the IRS, but really you're not going to get in trouble. Just make sure that whatever you're bringing in, you have plans to reinvest that into your community and into your mission work. However, the opposite side of that, as you see in the bottom box, is you're not guaranteed anything. So some of these other models, as you'll hear about, there are a certain amount of money that they know they can count on. With a 501c3, every year you have to decide how much you're gonna get or go after, how you're gonna do that, and nothing is guaranteed to you. So it is probably a little bit more work on the fundraising side, but as you can see here, also the sky is the limit. If you do it properly, you can be funding your organization really, really well. You're not limited. Next slide. And that was it. Okay, I had a feeling that was my last slide.
Oh, excellent. I'm sorry, Jen. I thought there was one more.
That's
Thank
okay.
you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for that grounding of the 501c3s. And I know there's a mix of people on this call right now who may already have their 501c3 status. And as we get into these next presentations, you can see how these things can build on each other. But a 501c3 is a great starting point. And one thing I'll just note, all three of these models that we're discussing today, they're all hard to do. There's no one that's like easy. And so this really speaks to, your community goodwill, the bandwidth that you have, and figuring out the model that works best for you. But we'll get into Q&A at the end. So please feel free to type in your questions along the way. And so with that, Sandra, I'd like to invite you to share on business improvement districts.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. So this is a great segue from 501c3s because we actually are one, in addition to being a special services taxing district, which is also a business improvement district. This is allowable by state law. They allow either special service taxing district or business improvement district. The chapter of the state law is up for you on the screen. Basically, you have to have 35,000 or more in your population. So that's an automatic criteria that will eliminate some, but most people that want to form this, you'll understand why this population is needed. So the purpose is to promote economic general welfare of the citizens, property owners throughout the preservation throughout the district, enhance, protect, and develop the economic health of the municipality. So that's primarily, this is what gives you the power to create this in your municipalities. Next, please. Okay, this is kind of a loaded slide, so I'll take them one at a time for you. Once you determine you'd like to do this, the very first thing that needs to happen is you need a municipal ordinance to allow it. And in that ordinance, it will spell out a variety of things for you, including who's going to run it, how are we going to create this district. So in Middletown, the Common Council passed an ordinance, and they named the town clerk the person that would run an absentee ballot program for the district. They then created the district by creating the boundaries for it and said it will be, this area of Main Street, from church to church, from this side street to that side street. And then they taxed the town clerk with the duty of going ahead and running that election. Side note, I happened to be the town clerk 21 years ago when this happened. So this puts me in a very unique spot to talk about it, because it took 3 tries to pass this district back then. And what ended up happening was we had to keep modifying the district and shrinking it down and eliminating the naysayers who didn't want the district per se. So what we finally came up with was 3/4 of our downtown Main Street is in fact in the downtown business district. The north end businesses primarily are not. What happens is the vote goes to the property owners, and this is where it got a little complicated. It's not like a vote in an election. It's by assessment. So if you have 12 owners of a building, which you will on commercial properties, you have to divide the assessment by those 12 people, and then their vote is a yes or a no that you then throw into the whole total. And what has to happen is you've got to have 51% of that total assessed value of that district pass with a yes vote. If you can get through all of that, the next thing that is spelled out in the ordinance is that there will be a commission of elected commissioners. There'll be 9 of them, and the building owners will vote on those. And so we run that election. Okay, who wants to run for the commission? You run an election for that, and you pick your 9 people. You know, everyone nominates themselves or other people, and you send out a ballot, and the 9 top people were the first commissioners of the downtown business district. Then they elect their officers and set their bylaws, and they're off and running. And the way it's done here is our tax collector actually collects our district monies, and then we request them from the city treasurer, who writes us a check. So while we're not a technical city department, we are created and work through the city because that's who gave us the authority to be in existence, if you will. And a side note on this slide, the only way to delete this district, or let's say you don't want the district any longer, is you have to have another referendum to vote it out. And so unfortunately, there's no way to join it, because once it's formed, you can't just add to it. So there's that little caveat. Okay, next slide. In Middletown, to give you an idea, right now, my total assessment is about 102 million in building assessments. So that will give us a $155,000 to $170,000 budget every year. That's what's great about this. It's guaranteed, it's tax money, it gets collected. The reason it's a range is because we will adjust our budget and adjust our mill rate based on what our goals are for the year. My key responsibilities, I work 30 hours a week. I promote and communicate with the businesses and building owners, keep them apprised of everything happening. For example, we've got a Route 9 light issue here. We have a major highway that runs along our river. They want to remove lights. That's a massive, big, controversial issue. So we keep them apprised of all of that. Parking structures that are being built, anything that's happening in downtown, my job is to make sure everyone knows about it. I seek additional funding. We received 3 ARPA grants over the last 3 years. We received $300,000 from the city to do a tree project and buy new garbage cans for downtown because ours were old and ugly. So we received ARPA money to do that, as well as we received 2 $100,000 grants from the state to do a vacant storefront art project where we fill our vacant storefronts with art from local artists. So that's how we seek additional funding. We actively address concerns, things that aren't working properly, graffiti, potholes, anything in this district that's not right, we actively address it, and that's my job. We promote through social media, website mostly, and Facebook and Instagram. We've really ramped that up and eliminated radio and TV ads. We found that clearly social media is definitely the way to go. We run a very robust gift card program, which we pay for. It is not any charge to our businesses. And we have about 95 participating businesses in that program. We sell about 6,000 cards a year, and about $300,000 of that will go right back into our businesses. So that's a great program. And we advocate with the city and the chamber. We work as partners, all 3 of us. We have a great communication network here. We all work well together. We have monthly meetings with our commission. And at those meetings are the mayor, the economic development director, the health director, the public works director, our police chief, our St. Vincent de Paul director, our Chamber of Commerce representative, a Wesleyan University representative, and our North End group representative. So we clearly all work collectively. And this meeting happens as well as a North End meeting, and they're all at that same meeting, and we're all hearing the same things and working together to resolve our issues. And then every year we have an annual meeting in March. We vote on our budget. And we elect commissioners every other year, and we vote in officers every year. Next slide, please. Pros and cons, kind of obvious, right, when you hear this. So we have recurring budget. We don't need to worry about our budget year over year. And we are able to be a 501c3, which also allows us to approach other funding sources and do other projects. And the cons is passing it. Clearly, it took us 3 tries. But if you're vigilant and the building owners really want it because they see the value, it can be done. And you're strictly responsible for this district. It doesn't encompass anywhere else. You know, a lot of places in Middletown actually wanted, can we join the gift card program? Can we be on your website? Sorry, no, it's taxpayer dollars, so it has to stay with taxpayer properties. And you are actually eligible for 501c3 funding if you're also a 501c3. So just keep that in mind. And with that, I think I am done.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I just wanted to touch on one quick thing here around you are responsible just for your district, but I did notice that you now have a new program where you're kind of letting other businesses join in. Can you just briefly touch
Yeah, so
on that?
what happened was the North End businesses, as the building owners changed, because they, you know, then when they sold, the new building owners like, well, why am I not in the district? I want to be in the district. So what we allowed is a like a commercial advertising package where we let them buy in for $250 a year, and that gets you everything. You know, you're in our brochure, you're on our website, you're in our gift card program, etc. So we do allow that. We did waive that during COVID because things were really tough for people, but that is a program we offer because you can't just jump into the district, which now, 21 years later, every building owner down there wishes they were in the district.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's that. Yeah,
exactly. Thank you. Thank you. We'll definitely get into more questions here in a moment. And let's have our final presenter speak about TIF districts. Mike, please take it away.
Thank you, Kristen. Good morning, everyone. I am Mike Andreana. I'm a partner at Pullman and Comley. My primary practice is government financing, which includes, not only governments issuing tax-exempt general obligation bonds to finance schools and roads and libraries, but also I do quite a bit of tax increment financing. In Connecticut, setting up TIF districts, I was the primary drafter of it's now almost 9 years old, the TIF legislation in Connecticut. So I have worked with a number of TIF districts in Connecticut. Next slide, Kristen. Okay, just to start really kind of an overview, a couple things. One, unlike a 501c3 or a special services district, a TIF district isn't really a separate legal entity. It's more of a geographical district. And the whole theory behind tax increment financing is that you're not creating or establishing a new additional real property tax. What you're doing is creating a district, and based on increases in assessed value within the district, the real property taxes that are generated from the increase can be used for what you'll see later, a wide variety of TIF district expenses, programs, costs, things like that. So it is advantageous in that way. And here's, I think, a good kind of picture that shows how TIF works. So the fixed tax base is the assessed value at the time you create the TIF district. And that assessed value, regardless of what the tax rate is, the taxes generated from that assessed value will always go back to the municipality for general fund expenses. Increases in assessed value are kind of the blue triangle there, and those increases can be used within the TIF district for various TIF expenses. The other important thing that you see here, and we'll talk about this a little later, is TIF districts do have an end life. Particularly in Connecticut, they all have a term. Under the legislation, TIF districts can go out as long as 50 years, but at the end of that term, whatever it is, then all of the real property taxes will go back into the town's general fund. Next slide. Okay, how do you create a TIF district in Connecticut? You know, there is statutory guidance there, and it's pretty detailed as to what you need to do. First step is that part of a TIF district is you have to prepare a master plan. And that master plan, you know, typically my experience has been you get input from a number of different parties, including local government officials, but I've also typically seen property owners within the proposed TIF district get involved in creating the plan, and we'll touch a little later on what the plan includes. Important thing under state law in Connecticut, a municipality can have more than one TIF district within its borders, but the total original assessed value of all the TIF districts within any one municipality can't be more than 10% of the overall assessed value of the municipality. So there is a limit there. Once you create the district master plan, it goes to the planning agency for an advisory opinion that the plan is consistent with the municipality's plan of conservation and development. And this opinion you need to get prior to having the legislative body in town approve the TIF district plan. There's a requirement for at least one public hearing. My experience has been so far that I've seen more often than not having more than one public hearing, particularly in those instances where the legislative body is a town meeting, because there you need voters, you know, the voters of the town to approve the TIF district. And that's the last thing. Once you've created the plan, gotten the opinion from the planning agency, had your public hearing, you then need legislative body approval. So as probably most of us know, here in Connecticut, there are many forms of legislative bodies. You might have a council, you might have a representative town meeting, and still in Connecticut, there are many, many towns which are, which the legislative body is a true town meeting where everyone within the town that qualifies as a voter can vote. Next slide. Okay, so what's in the district plan? I'm not going to touch on all of these, but there are some which I think are more important than others. As I mentioned before, in your plan, you have to have a maximum duration of the district, which can't exceed 50 years. That's by statute. You also have in your plan, and this is important, and is that the maximum percentage of incremental TIF revenues that are allocated to the district. So as I highlighted before, you have a base assessed value that's set at the time you create the district. Taxes from that always go back to the municipality, but any increases in assessed value beyond that, your plan lays out exactly how much of that increase and the taxes generated from it will be allocated to the district. Under state law in Connecticut, that percentage can be really anywhere from 1% to 100%. So, and I have typically seen, working with TIF districts, most of the kind of percentage allocation is in the neighborhood of, say, 50 to 75%. going to the TIF district. I've worked with one where 90% went to the TIF district, and I think I've worked with one where 25% of the TIF revenues went to the TIF district. In addition, the plan, I would recommend, it's not required, but it's permissive, is the establishment of a TIF advisory committee. As I said before, because the TIF district isn't a separate legal entity, you don't really have a board or anything like that. So what I've recommended is typically creating an advisory committee, which would include probably local government officials, property owners, and maybe even some consultants that will kind of almost work like a board, but in an advisory position. The other thing that's important is if you have money that's going to be used within the TIF district, you need something in your plan, and it's typically part of the financial plan, as to who ultimately decides how the money within the TIF district is going to be spent. And typically, because these are real property, municipal taxes, ultimately, that group is typically made up of local government officials with probably input from the advisory committee. And that will kind of outline how the money raised by the district will be spent. Next slide. Okay, so here are some examples of kind of the costs that are permitted to be financed by TIF revenues. You know, you have your classic public infrastructure improvements. So in this case, within a TIF district, maybe it's a downtown, and maybe one of the projects is redoing sidewalks. In some ways, this is, I think, more appropriate, since it's not taxpayers throughout the whole town, many who probably have really no connection to downtown, but it's the properties within the downtown that are paying, say, for the sidewalks. You can also do the same thing for facade improvements. There is a municipality in Connecticut that's created a downtown TIF district, and within that district has created a revolving loan program for downtown business owners, where they borrow from this fund to make improvements to their business downtown and basically pay back, so it's kind of self-generating. The statute permits you to use TIF revenues for personnel costs. So if you had sufficient incremental tax revenues, you could hire, say, a director of the district to kind of run the district and pay that from TIF revenues. You can use TIF revenues for kind of downtown or property owner technical costs, whether that's marketing, whether that's business training, whether you're paying to bring someone in to host a seminar for downtown business owners. That is all permitted. Next slide. Okay, so I was trying to think a little more about how you can use TIF and connect it with a Main Street management program. So as I said, you know, typically a percentage of the TIF revenues going back to the town general fund, which makes sense because if your TIF district's expanding, there's probably increases in governmental services that the town or city will need to pay for. But the money that stays with the TIF district, you can, as I said, use as kind of a pay-as-you-go basis. You know, use it for a revolving loan fund, use it for code compliance. If property owners need to bring buildings up to code, maybe they get a grant. I've seen other municipalities use it for tenant lease payment or a portion of it. new business wants to come in, maybe they're not generating the cash flow initially. So the TIF district can contribute a portion of the monthly rent payments to help the landlord and to help the tenant. You can also use TIF in kind of its more traditional sense, using it for kind of public infrastructure projects or site preparation. You can even use TIF revenues under Connecticut law to pay for private development costs. And you see this sometimes in Connecticut, where a TIF district is created around a fairly large-scale development, and a portion of the incremental taxes go back to the developer to help pay the costs of the project. That's different than what we're talking about today, but it is a use. Kristen, next. So what are, kind of some of the advantages and disadvantages of TIF? I think, so it's not a new tax or any additional tax that a property owner has to pay on top of what they're already paying. If assessments increase, then typically your taxes are going to go up. And so you're paying it. It's just how those taxes are allocated. I like the fact that the TIF revenues are used within the district where the TIFs are generated. Different than a special services district, the property owners, it is not a specific property owner approval that's required for the TIF district. It is the legislative body. Now, that might include property owners within the district, but if it's, again, a town meeting, that's also including voters throughout the entire town. As I said, it's not a separate legal entity. I highly suggest that if a TIF district is created, you have an advisory committee. The uses are fairly broad and flexible, what you can use TIF revenues for. Maybe some of the disadvantages is that, you don't have TIF revenues unless you have increases in assessed value. So you can have instances where you create a district, but you're really not generating any TIF revenues because assessed values within that district are not increasing. So it's important when you're creating TIF districts to look at the district and kind of think about the likelihood of assessed values within that district increasing. Will there be specific development that would increase property values of certain properties, but maybe have spillover effect to adjoining properties? So that's a possibility. And you also have, and I mentioned this, is that if you're running it kind of for Main Street management, you might have large-scale developers competing for those TIF revenues, where a developer might come in and say, well, I want all of my incremental tax revenues to go back to my project, as opposed to being spread around for the entire district. The other thing I would mention, and I guess you'd have to kind of think about it, whether this is an advantage or disadvantage, is kind of the timing of creating a TIF district. My experience has been they can be done in as little as 3 months if you have a dedicated group of consultants and local government officials to keep on top of it, work on the plan and get that done and get the approvals needed. I've also seen some districts take as long as 9 months to a year to get created, depending on how fast people are moving and how quickly they go through the approval process. I have yet, but this is no guarantee for the future, but I've yet to see a TIF district not get approved when it has been presented to the legislative body. And I think part of that is making sure you educate the people that are going to approve the district so they understand what's really going on. I think that might be it, but let's next slide.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Mike. Really great presentations from all of our speakers. I'm going to open it up to questions now. I want to spotlight all of our presenters here so you can see them a little bit more clearly. I do know that we have a little bit of a national audience today, and so one thing to keep in mind is that we are specifically talking about the Connecticut landscape today. So be sure to, talk with your respective attorneys and legislatures and all of that for more specific context for your area. So let's just get into some of the questions. First, this one is coming from Oregon. Do you have to vote on the bid TIF districts every so many years? In Oregon, they have to vote on every 3 years. What do you have to do that here in Connecticut?
For the special taxing or bids, no. Once you pass them, they stay in place until you choose to dissolve them, which will be a vote of the same people who put it in place.
Got it. And Mike, you had mentioned for TIFs, it's a term.
And for TIF districts, you vote once when it's created, and that might be the only vote you need until it terminates based on its plan. I will mention that under TIF districts, you do have the ability to enlarge a TIF district if you can fall within your 10% threshold. But if you're adding properties to the TIF district, then you go through kind of the whole approval process from the beginning.
We have a question here for Mike. Can a TIF district occupy real property in more than one town? For example, often commercially neglected boundary regions between cities and their abutting suburbs, or would tax allocated treatment of multi-town areas have to be left to special taxing districts?
TIF districts under the current legislation that's in the books now is single municipality TIF districts. I have had some conversations about the idea of a kind of a maybe multi-town or regional districts. Nothing's happened yet. As we know in Connecticut, if you have an idea and you can kind of put some special legislation together that works, that might be another possibility.
Another question around TIF. Can TIF be extended after the expiration period? In the TIF district, would it be possible for out-of-district businesses to buy in like the special services district?
To answer the first question, yes. If your district kind of expired on its own terms, say at the end of 20 years or whatever you selected, you could create kind of a new district with the same geographic boundaries. Again, starting the whole process over from the beginning with all the approvals, the opinions, public hearings, everything like that. As far as out-of-district property owners buying in, I don't think that's really a possibility with TIF districts, since it's really the two things. It's the property taxes within the district, but I think more importantly, the way the statute's drafted is that the tax revenues from the TIF district kind of need to be spent within the TIF district itself.
Mm-hmm. Great questions coming in here, and I just wanted to just interject real quickly. Something that I want to underscore, if it was not fully articulated, is that all three of these models, at least here in Connecticut, can be built on top of each other. So Middletown, you know, your story is it actually, I don't know how many years ago it was, Sandra, had a 501c3 for their downtown district.
A group of building owners and business owners got together, wanted to create something for downtown, formed a 501c3 called the Middletown Downtown Group. And that metamorphosized into the special service taxing district when it kept growing. But what they did was they never abandoned the 501c3. So essentially the commissioners serve as that 501c3's organization as well, is how they worked it out in the bylaws.
Yeah, and there's nothing kind of in theory saying that you can't
couldn't
have a
form a TIF,
501c have a TIF as well.
Absolutely. If they wanted to do that, I think that it would cause an uproar, but they could do it.
Yeah. And I think all of you have said, you know, so much of it is knowing the pulse of your community, what's the appetite, and a lot of education
Mhm.
and figuring out, you know, what's kind of the best path forward.
Absolutely.
All right, we got some more questions. We got a lot on TIF. So Mike, let's see if we can fast fire these.
Okay.
Has anyone used a TIF to fund interventions to mitigate vulnerabilities to climate change?
That's a great question. Not that I'm aware of, but there's no reason why I don't think it could be if where you're trying to mitigate possible damages is within your TIF district.
Great. Jen, this question is for you. What are tools to make raising money fun and manageable for boards and staff?
I feel like that's a loaded question. It depends on what you think is fun. And I usually urge board members or committee members to think about their personality styles. And sometimes somebody else needs to think about your personality style if you're too in it. You can tell when people light up. You know what I mean? Like if we're talking about Main Street, we've got the 4 points. When you start talking about facades and buildings and wayfinding signs, do you light up? You know, when you're talking about the organization and you know, keeping notes and minutes and things like that, you know, what's the thing that really lights you up? Because I find when you get excited about things and you talk about things, people will join in. And it just, you know, whatever lights you up, that's what you need to be talking about and communicating to your stakeholders. I know a lot of groups are starting to consider board give get policies. And so also, are you talking about fundraising as an organization, or are you talking about fundraising because you're on the board and you're going to bring something to the organization? Because those look a little bit different. The fundraisers within the 501c3, I would say you want to stick to your mission and really be communicating what value you're bringing to the community. If you're on your own doing it, of course, you know, you can open that up to things that aren't necessarily mission related. Fun, like I said, I think that depends on what you like. Like I'm one of those nerdy people. I can sit down with data and spreadsheets and come up with all kinds of PowerPoints and things that might make a good annual report or something of that nature that sometimes is really helpful to go into letters to your town government to see if they would fund you, or to private donors. Sometimes it's just if you have a really good event downtown that people get excited about or that you get excited about, the more your enthusiasm spills over, the more people will sponsor it, join it, do the thing, whatever you need. But I would say start with looking around your board table and deciding whose personality lends itself to what type of thing that can help with fundraising so that everybody's having a good time. Because if you are, you will have a much easier time bringing in money.
For sure. Thank you. Mike, back to you. What is the process to change the allocation of TIF funds between the town and the district?
That would be because your plan just needs to have the maximum allocation that would go to a TIF district. If you're going to change that and the town is on board with that, I would think you could have something probably passed by the town. And again, this is why it's important to designate within the plan who's kind of responsible for allocating the TIF funds, but maybe something if it's a body, it's the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, something as simple, I think, as a resolution could, you know, basically not going past the maximum, but changing the allocation within the maximum number.
Mhm. Is there a ballpark pricing for a consultant to develop a TIF master plan?
Ballpark, I would say at this point, since we have a lot of pretty good models, you are probably in the neighborhood of 20 to 25,000.
Is it necessary to create a TIF district only in a downtown business district if you have multiple business areas not in the downtown?
No, absolutely not. You can have multiple TIF districts. Again, your only restriction is the kind of 10% test in the statute. Doesn't have to be downtown. It can be in any part of the town. And as I said, it could be multiple districts.
Sandra, I'd like to kind of put you back 21 years ago when Middletown was trying to pass the bid district and it failed 3 times. Any kind of lessons learned that you remember of kind of that process and what it took to finally get it passed?
Yeah, so what distinctly I recall is it was important for them to get major players in downtown. So for example, Liberty Bank is your corporate offices are here in downtown Middletown. And the president of that bank really felt strongly that a special services taxing district would benefit Middletown because 21 years ago, our downtown was not what it is today. It was hurting. We had a lot of issues. We couldn't get restaurants here, businesses here, et cetera. By passing that district, it then allowed us to go to for example, the Inn at Middletown came right after we passed that district, because what people recognized was the dedication and the effort to have a funding source that strictly went to downtown. You know, we are able to do a planter program every year that's beautiful and beautifies things. We're able to offer micro grants. So when people are opening their businesses, they can buy flowers and pots and new umbrellas. Little things, little impact that goes so far when you're trying to revive or rejuvenate your downtown and help the actual businesses. So it's the building owners paying the tax, but it's the businesses that are benefiting from having this district. So having corporations behind it, like banks or big law firms, anybody that's in your downtown that will support it, huge to start there. Also, get a pulse on the businesses so they can then tell their property owners they want it. You know, if you go right to the building owner and say, we want to pass a new tax, they're going to be like, nope. But if the businesses say, hey, we pay rent and this is a very tiny tax. You know, it's a very small amount to help us. And here's all the benefits we can have. The building owners will start buying in.
Yeah, it really goes back to that education, as Mike has said.
Absolutely.
And
knowing
even
the pulse. You got to know.
Yeah. Yeah, and absolutely,
And
even with 501c3s, we see communities who are really hesitant to create like a downtown nonprofit, and there's a lot of misinformation or I don't know,
Exactly.
misconception about it.
Education is important, and what the benefits are is important.
Absolutely. We have one other question here, and in Connecticut, are there economic improvement districts? This is coming from Oregon. I don't know if we have economic improvement districts.
I've never heard
No,
of economic improvement.
nothing that's that term, right? Probably
Right.
the closest thing would be the TIF district, or that we just don't have economic improvement districts.
Yeah, just one thing for our national audience here. Connecticut is, I think, one of 2 states that we don't have county governments, and so that's just one thing that's fundamentally different about how we do things here. Excellent. I think I addressed all of the questions here in the chat. Let me just take a quick look. Oh, how many TIF districts have been established in Connecticut?
I'd say right now we're probably in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 different TIF districts. There are 2 or 3 municipalities that have multi-TIF districts. Bloomfield, Windsor Locks, a couple of other ones.
And, you know, actually I had a question that came to mind. The bids, they have a population kind of requirement. Do TIFs have a population requirement?
No population requirement. So you see them in very small towns, and you've seen them in the largest cities in Connecticut.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. This is a really fantastic panel. I appreciate all of your insights. This was really great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. I
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it.
And I just have a few last kind of words here as we wrap up. Connecticut Main Street Center, we invite you to join the 80+ communities around the state committed to improving their Main Street by becoming a member of Connecticut Main Street Center. Our network includes professionally managed downtowns and neighborhoods, economic development departments, and regional organizations. We encourage you to check out our website, connecticutmainstreet.org, to learn more. And huge plug for our upcoming summit on addressing Main Street blight and vacancy on March 14th at the Goodwin Hotel in Hartford. Early bird pricing ends tomorrow, so get your tickets today, and we look forward to seeing you there. And really, we're going to be sharing a lot of great tried and true kind of things that have been done in Connecticut, and looking at the national best practices and what kind of new policy that we can bring to the state. So we really hope that you join us for this interactive summit and conversation. And with that, once again, thank you so much to all of our sponsors. And a reminder, when you exit this webinar, you will be prompted to complete an evaluation. Please take a moment to do it. It really helps us shape our educational programming. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.